series that I've been preaching on the book of Ruth. So if you get to Ruth chapter 4 this morning, this is the 11th sermon from the book of Ruth. And quite honestly, I'm not sure. I like to already know what series we're going to be going into, and I've not felt led yet for a particular book. We may actually do some specific topics this summer that might be worthwhile. I do know that Brother DeMilson will be preaching during sometime in the next 2 or 3 weeks, so I don't want to have a long series at this point. I'm going to start in Ruth chapter 4, verse 13 this morning. Ruth 4, verse 13, and I'm going to read to the end. And the scriptures say, So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife, and he went in to her, and the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. Then the women said to Naomi, Blessed is the Lord, who has not left you without a redeemer today, and may his name be famous in Israel. May he also be to you a restorer of life and a sustainer of your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you, is better to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him. Then Naomi took the child and laid him in her lap and became his nurse. The neighbor women gave him a name, saying, A son has been born to Naomi, so they named him Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David. Now these are the generations of Perez. To Perez was born Hezron, and to Hezron was born Ram, and to Ram Aminadab, and to Aminadab was born Nahshon, and to Nahshon Salmon, and to Salmon was born Boaz, and to Boaz Obed, and to Obed was born Jesse, and to Jesse David. That is King David. Let's look this morning at our message. I've got some comments by way of introduction, and we have spent some time in this book. So at the end of the series, who is the main character? Is it Naomi? She certainly is the matriarch of the family. She was the one who went along with her husband Elimelech to Moab, where she became a widow and lost her 2 sons, and then made that decision, we're going back to Bethlehem. Is it Naomi? Is it Ruth? The book bears her name. She has so much virtue. She works so hard. She makes the right decisions. She converts to the Lord. Is it Boaz? Boaz is generous, a true redeemer of redeemers, a wonderful picture of Christ, and he is in fact, in this story, the Redeemer. I'm going to let you just think about that for a while, and we'll revisit this at the end of the message. I want to just kind of review what we've covered, and not in the way we've covered it, but what we have covered. In chapter 1, we get Ruth's background, and we see loyal commitment. In chapter 2, we see Ruth's bustling labor, where she is learning lessons. In chapter 3, we see Ruth's boldness. She looks to Boaz for redemption. She asks Boaz to marry her. And in chapter 4, we see Ruth's blessing. Love consummated. This is just a little side thing, but I want you to understand that Ruth illustrates difficult trials test the loyalty of our commitment to God's loving kindness. That is one of the main things that Ruth is investing in the message of the book of Ruth. And so let's look this morning at the kindred. Of course, the kinsman redeemer, the kindred redeemer. We understand the prospects of family and how that people are brought into family, and 2 different families make a bigger, greater family, and this goes on and on and on, and has been going on and on and on. But in chapter 4, verse 13, I love this. So Boaz took Ruth. He was not just talk. If you remember last week, he basically paints this bleak picture to the nearest kinsman redeemer who will not sully himself by being married to a Gentile woman. And the nearest kinsman redeemer says, oh, I can't redeem her. And Boaz quickly jumps in and says, well, I will redeem her. But talk is one thing. And getting to the altar is another thing. And so Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. And he went into her, and the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. This is, in fact, kindred. This is, in fact, a beautiful thing. And in here, I want you to see, and I've asked this question, here's an important person here, and you see the key person in the portion we're covering will be in white, and the person we're talking about here is Ruth. Even though it's Boaz that marries her, if there's a wedding where the guy is the featured person in the wedding, ladies, you got the wrong husband. I'm just going to tell you that right now. You got the wrong husband if he has to be the dreamboat of the wedding. I can't give you a Bible verse for that. I'm just saying that's Joe's opinion. But I want you to see a couple things in this verse. First of all, Boaz marries. This is redeems. He redeems. And what does Ruth get out of this? She gets a husband. Now, I'm sure sometimes, ladies, that doesn't seem like the biggest bonus in the world, but she gets a husband. And it's very important for Ruth and for the family of Elimelech. Remember now, this child that will be born will not be carrying on Boaz's name, will not be inheriting Boaz's property per se. He'll be the new patriarch of the family land in Bethlehem. But Boaz marries her, and she is redeemed. We sing the song, "Redeemed, how I love to proclaim it." I want you to see that this Redeemer, the kinsman Redeemer, is an Old Testament picture of Christ who brings us into the family. When we talk about in the book of Revelation, the marriage supper of the Lamb, we're the bride of Christ. This is a picture of this redemption, of having a land, having a home. I go to prepare a place for you, of having a future. So I want you to see that in this verse, we see that Boaz marries her. But I want you to see that also in that verse, the Lord blesses her. In verse 13, so Boaz took Ruth and she became his wife, and he went into her, and the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. What a wonderful thing. What a wonderful thing. What this verse contains, I want to break it down. I want to, first of all, point out that we can look at Old Testament and New Testament examples of how this did not work, and I will bring them up. First of all, the consummation of the marriage. Not going to give you any details. Okay, this is not where I'm going to break that down point by point by point. But I want you to understand that with the Redeemer, we see in the book of Genesis where somebody in fact said, "I will marry," but did not consummate the marriage of the Redeemer. And that cost him his life. I want you to know that every redemption did not become also a conception. Not every redemptive marriage produced conception. Do you remember Jesus when he was talking with the Sadducees and they were trying to trick him up at the end just before he was crucified? And they said, "There were with us 7 brothers, and the oldest married a wife and died without having children. And then the next one married her, and the next one married her, and the next one married her, and they get down to the 7th, and he dies also. And last of all, the woman died also childless." Not every redemption and not every marriage is directed in this way in which there is conception. This is the active steps and successful outcomes of redemption. And then childbirth. If you ever went through the heartache of having lost a child, you understand that conception is one thing and childbirth is another, and there's a very painful mourning process that goes on. I want you to see that this verse gives us the trifecta of wonderful things. If there was ever in your life a time where you needed 3 C's and it wasn't on your report card, it would be here that there was a consummation to the marriage, that there was a conception, and that there was a childbirth. The active steps of success and successful outcomes of redemption. What was the outcome of this, the outcome was that that family line did not die, that that property did not become divvied up in somebody else's property, that the family name continued. And so that first verse 13, really does feature the bounty and benefit of God toward Ruth, and Boaz as well. But there's a kindred part too in this. Because it was not just Ruth that was redeemed, it was Naomi. And this now gives us our next character. Who's the main character in the book of Ruth? Well, let's look at Naomi. This is part 2. And let's look at verses 14 and 15. By the way, I'm going to celebrate that I got through that conception verse and didn't actually blush. Just want you to know, if I'm a little bit pink, it's because of the heat. It wasn't that I was embarrassed. Much. Okay, so let's look at verses 14 and 15. Then the women said to Naomi, "Blessed is the Lord who has not left you without a redeemer today. May his name become famous in Israel. May he also be to you a restorer of life and a sustainer of your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you and is better than 7 sons to you, has given birth to him." Can we just back up for a second here? I'm going to put my bookmark here, and I want to back up to chapter 1, verse 19. Because I want you to see what the women had first said to Naomi when she came back. This is after having lost Elimelech, Mahlon, Chilion, having walked through the arid area of Moab, around the north side of the Dead Sea, and then back down through the Holy Land into Bethlehem. And as they arrived, perhaps a little travel-weary, certainly hungry, almost certainly sad and depressed. Verse 19, so they went until they came to Bethlehem. And when they had come to Bethlehem, all the city was stirred because of them. And the women said, "Is this Naomi?" You remember Naomi's response? "Don't call me Naomi, call me Mara, call me bitter, call me roughed up, distressed, troubled, but don't call me pleasantness." You remember the first thing was, wow, is that really Naomi? It looks like her, but she looks totally wrecked, is basically what they're saying here. But now look, we are looking here at our final pronounced blessing in the book of Ruth, and there's a ton of them. And by the way, I think to the one, the blessings are not only pronounced, but are actually engaged by God. So let's look at this. The women speak. This is the final pronounced blessing in Ruth, and I want you to see what they said. First of all, they said, "Bless God." And that we ought to do. When we're praying about something and the Lord allows it to come to pass, the amount of energy we put into begging for that to happen and praying that that should happen, we should be having that kind of energy and thanking God that that happened, and thanking God that He allowed it to happen, and asking God that it might continue to happen. The first thing they did is bless God. In verse 14, so then the women said to Naomi, "Blessed is the Lord." Hey, all good things we get are from the Lord. You say, "Well, I worked really hard." It was God that gave you the strength, the ability, the wisdom, and the health to do that. Bless God. That's the first thing. And that's what should be the first thing on our tongues, is that we turn it back to the Lord. That the praise, the glory, the wonder, the splendor goes back to God. But then they said, "Bless you." The women said to Naomi, "Blessed is the Lord who has not left you without a redeemer today." She's blessed. You realize she went from not even having the strength to glean the fields to being at risk of hunger, at risk of homelessness, at risk of losing her life, to suddenly she has a son-in-law. For a woman that only had 2 sons, having a son-in-law had to have been a strange embrace, but having a son-in-law who absolutely loves and cares for her. Do you remember that night that Ruth spends at the threshing floor? And what does Boaz say when he's like, "Shh, we don't make much noise. Make sure you don't go home empty-handed," to Naomi. And he gives her 6 measures of barley. Remember when Ruth was gleaning, and he found out that she's gleaning for Naomi. He said, leave handfuls on purpose. And the first gleaning that she gets has 22 liters of barley. I like barley, but I'm going to tell you, 22 liters worth has got to be like a year's worth of barley. And then he sends her home with bucket loads more than that. Bless you. We should be blessing each other. And then bless Boaz. Let's not forget that Boaz was not the lead redeemer. And before there was even any redemption, he was already looking out for them. Being wealthy isn't a sin. Loving your wealth is the sin. And I want you to know that he seemed to be a influential and wealthy person who was totally gracious. Bless Boaz. Blessed is the Lord who has not left you without a redeemer. That's Boaz, the redeemer today. And may his name become famous in Israel. May he also be to you a restorer of life, a sustainer of your old age, for your daughter-in-law. Now bless Ruth. They probably looked at her a little cross-eyed when she came back. When they saw Naomi, they were probably wondering, where's Elimelech? Where's Mahlon and Chilion? Is she just coming for a visit? Having family members that immigrated to the United States, actually having all my family members immigrate to the United States, it was typically the men that came first. They'd raise up enough money in Europe, came to America, and then raise enough money to bring their family from Europe. But this is a very reverse order. And who is this girl with her? Who is this girl? But now it's bless Ruth. And not only blessed, but what do they say here? Better to you than 7 sons. I don't want to get too unspiritual here, but I remember in the 1960s, there was a song, I'm the one that's the 7th son. I don't know if you remember that. Don't want you to Google it now, but it was kind of one of these, I was associated with Johnny Rivers, but she comes back and they say, she's worth, and I got to tell you, the Old Testament was pretty rough, and it was a very paternal system. And to say this, it wasn't just a bluff. They're saying, you know what? Let's square this out. This Ruth is a keeper. This Ruth is wonderful. This Ruth doesn't need a man to have value. She is more valuable to you than 7 sons. And so the women speak. Bless God. Bless you. Bless Boaz. And bless Ruth. Now this is a slide from last Sunday. Many of you will recognize it. And I only added a little addenda to this. Do you remember when Boaz has that whole thing in the city gate, and they're determining now that closest relative is not going to redeem her, and that he has gathered all these witnesses, and I put, it was not just the elders, and in verse 11, all the people who were in the court, and the elders said, we are witnesses, and we said this is truly a community-wide blessing. Well, when I was studying, I actually went back, and I went back to my Hebrew Interlinear Bible, and I was checking the word for people there, and it was exclusively masculine. In other words, it was just the men that were talking. And so perhaps I was just a little overly zealous in saying the community-wide blessing, because now it's community-wide blessing. Because now it's the women that are saying, it's not just the men saying, we're going to do this, and the women are just sitting there like, okay, now it's everybody. Everybody's had a voice in this. And by the way, it does not matter, now you should listen, but the world and your neighbors and your friends should not be telling you who to marry. That should be something that the Lord lays on your heart. Now this is a change here. We've gone from the kindred 1 to the kindred part 2 to the kidnap. Now I mean this in the most innocuous way. That there's a kid taking a nap in her lap. Kidnap. You might not know this, but somebody that I'm married to, which is Belinda, was kidnapped by her grandparents. lived 2 years, didn't see her parents, 2 years old, gone. Lived in Tennessee, lived in Oklahoma, finally was kidnapped back. I'm glad she's part of my family and that I'm not part of hers. And I hope she doesn't mind me having shared that. The kidnap, look at verse 16. Then Naomi took the child, laid her in her lap, and became his nurse. The neighbor women gave him a name, saying, "A son has been born to Naomi," so they named him Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David. So I gave this a little subtitle, "It's Out of My Hands," because this child is going to be fostered by Naomi. What is out of our hands here? Well, first of all, the caring. It would appear that Naomi actually became the foster parent to this child, Obed, which 100 years ago was not that uncommon. Now, it's a little confusing. Not only the caring is spectacular. But it is a little confusing, because look what it says here in verse 17. The neighbor woman gave him a name, saying, "A son has been born to Naomi." Now, it does not appear that Naomi is actually at childbirth age any longer, that she has exceeded that. And so it's a little confusing. But this whole redemption was a family matter. When Boaz was redeeming Ruth, she would become his wife. When he was redeeming Ruth, the mother-in-law Naomi would be brought into the family. And now the calling, because this is unusual. Do you remember when John the Baptist was born? Do you remember the whole, we covered this about 6 months ago, the Christmas story, and how that John the Baptist's father, Zacharias, and his mother, Elizabeth, that Zacharias was in the temple, he was serving, he comes out, he can't talk, but he's told by the angel that he'll have a son, he's going to be the forerunner to the Messiah, and his name will be called John. And do you remember what happens? He cannot talk, right? He cannot talk, and his wife has this baby. Beyond, this is one of these miraculous births. She has this baby, John, and all the neighborhood women are saying, his name should be Zacharias, his name should be Zacharias. And maybe you've had a time where you've named a child and everybody wants to have the input what that child should be called. Well, this was the case. Now, I'm not sure about you, but I'm not relinquishing that privilege of naming a child. But it takes place here. When I put down at the bottom here, it's out of my hands, the child is out of the hands, and the name of the child is out of hand. Look who names this. They name him. The neighbor women gave him a name, saying, "A son has been born to Naomi," so they named him Obed. They named him. Now, I'm going to jump ahead just for a second, and I'm putting here in this section that the key person in this one is Obed. With a single verse, the child is woven into the royal lineage that culminates in David and ultimately in the Messiah. We see this in Matthew 1, 5-6. We see this in Luke chapter 3. Obed therefore stands at the hinge between the error of the judges, marked by spiritual turbulence, and he stands between that and the rise of a united monarchy marked by the covenant promises to David, which we see in 2 Samuel chapter 7. I'm going to go with that. And so they name him, and then the counting begins. This is certainly not written in Ruth's lifetime. They're taking us now, this part at least, and they're letting us know what this connection is. What is the connection? He is the father. So they named him Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David. That's David, King David. And then there's a continuing. The whole next paragraph is about that continuation. So let's look at the kingdom now. The kingdom. We've looked at the kindred and a couple ways. We've looked at the kidnap, and now let's look at the kingdom. And this main character is definitely David. Definitely David. Looking at verses 18 through 22. Now these are the generations of Perez. To Perez was born Hezron, and to Hezron was born Ram, and to Ram Amminadab, and to Amminadab was born Nahshon, and to Nahshon Salmon, and to Salmon was born Boaz, and to Boaz Obed, and to Obed was born Jesse, and to Jesse David. And that's how the book ends. Ends with King David. Let's look at this kingdom. Unfortunately, on Google Docs, the only icon they have for a crown looks rather spectacularly not like a typed character, but it is. So they give us this countdown. Perez, Hezron, Ram, Amminadab, Nahshon, Salmon, and now our Boaz, Obed, Jesse, King David. This is the layout. This book that stands between the Judges and 1 Samuel, which introduces the kingdom, lets us know that this is a change in the leadership style of the nation of Israel. Now, we know that the first king in Israel was not of this lineage. The first king of Israel was Saul, who was of the tribe of Benjamin. By the way, we have a very important Saul in the New Testament that's of the tribe of Benjamin, and his name comes to be changed to Paul the Apostle. But the initial name of Paul, even as he goes out at the start of the first missionary journey in Cyprus, is Saul, and he is of Benjamin. God is letting everything fall into place, and they're going to have a very poor king, and it's going to lead them to a very good king. And then they're going to go to a mediocre king, and then back to some poor kings. But 3 kings still beats 3 deuces. So we're going to just go with that. But what I want you to see now is this. I've been taking you back to Matthew. I've taken you back to Matthew 1 a few times. This time, no. I'm going to take you back to Luke chapter 3. Luke chapter 3. Luke chapter 3, right after Mark. Not that Mark, the other Mark, Gospel of Mark. Luke chapter 3. If your Bible breaks down into headings, you're going to notice the heading above verse 23 says something like the genealogy of Jesus. What I'd like for us to do is start in verse 31. The son of Maliah, the son of Menah, the son of Mattatha, the son of Nathan, the son of David, and we're counting from the nearest back. Okay, so we'll go back to that. The son of Nathan, the son of David, the son of Jesse, the son of Obed, the son of Boaz, the son of Salmon, the son of Nahshon, the son of Amminadab, the son of Admin, the son of Ram, the son of Hezron, the son of Perez, the son of Judah. This genealogy is based on the apparent parent. Matthew chapter 1, the genealogy goes through Mary, not in Luke. Luke chapter 3, Luke is toward Greeks. So look how they start in verse 23. When he began his ministry, Jesus himself was about 30 years of age, being as was supposed the son of Joseph. Right? Because Joseph was not his father, the Holy Spirit brought Jesus into being in Mary. And then after that, it takes us through the line of Joseph's family, and it counts backward. Not only that, it doesn't just count backward or start at Abraham and Sarah. Did you see where it ends? Let's go. Let's go to verse 37. Well, let's start at verse 36. The son of Cainan, the son of Arphaxad, the son of Shem, the son of Noah, the son of Lamech, the son of Methuselah, the son of Enoch, the son of Jared, the son of Mahalalel, the son of Cainan, the son of Enosh, the son of Seth, the son of Adam, the son of God. When the New Testament talks about Jesus, and Paul describes Jesus as the second Adam, when we sing that hymn, Second Adam from above, reinstate us in your love, when we sing that at Christmas, we are talking about this genealogy. We are talking about that Jesus is the Son of God. He is, as Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15, I don't want to misquote that to you, 1 Corinthians chapter 15, Paul says this about the resurrection. 13. It's at the very, not the very, very end, but toward the very end of 1 Corinthians 15, where it says this. Keep going. Here we are. Yep. And this is here in verse 45. And so it is written, the first man, Adam, became a living soul. The last Adam became a life-giving spirit. However, the spiritual is not first, but the natural, then the spiritual. The first man is from the earth, earthy. The second man is the Lord from heaven. As is the earthy, such also are those who are earthly. As is the heavenly, such are they also that are heavenly. Just as we have borne the image of the earthy, we shall also bear the image of the heavenly. Now this I say, brethren, that flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God, neither does the perishable inherit the imperishable. When we see in the book of Ruth, Boaz as the Redeemer, when we see David as a king, it is a picture of Jesus, the Redeemer, and Jesus, the King. When we see the lineage that lists down in the family members, think of all the different opportunities for a firstborn son, and these start and they fall into harmony. Where at this point in the genealogy? Matthew chapter 1 lets us know that God is going to be gracious, that salvation is not merely for the Jews, but for all people. When we read here in Matthew chapter 1 and verse 5, Solomon was the father of Boaz by Rahab. That is the Rahab from Jericho. The Rahab that was at one point a harlot. The Rahab who lodged the two spies. We can see that was a Gentile woman that brought forth a child that was going to be in the lineage of Jesus. And who did they bring forth? Let me read that again. Solomon was the father of Boaz by Rahab. How was it that that one kinsman redeemer was like, oh, I can't marry a Gentile? And Boaz was like, I can't help but marry a Gentile because his mother was a Gentile and she had raised him and she had a relationship with God, and where you're born doesn't matter and what your tribe is doesn't matter when you come into the family of God. So we see the lineage there. Is David the king? The key factor. I want you to have considerations today. So at the end of the series, who is the main character? Well, I think there's three main sub-characters. I couldn't give you the three musketeers' names. I know one's D'Artagnan, but I didn't look it up. But one for all and all for one. They're all very important. Boaz is important. Ruth is important. Naomi is important. I can't break it down like the Three Stooges because nobody wants Shem. Maybe you want Curly or you want Mo, but not a lot of people are clamoring for Shem. So I wouldn't use the Three Stooges here, but the Three Musketeers. They're very important. This book and the redemption all point to the unmentioned character, Jesus the Messiah. That is what Matthew is carrying on for information. That's what Luke is carrying on for information as they're introducing the Messiah. Consideration for today. You may have a favorite character out of this. I think Ruth is totally cool. I admire the integrity of Boaz, the strength of Naomi. If one of those three characters doesn't resound with you, I do know this, that the unmentioned character Jesus will. But let's look finally, our last truth from Ruth. Against the dark prospects of the judges, Ruth sparkles like a bright star. Joshua and Judges have mostly to do with Israel's relationship with the land. Ruth focuses more on the seed promise of the Abrahamic covenant, with special emphasis on the line of the King of Kings. Now, the book of Ruth isn't really, the closing chapters isn't really a gospel message. It brings us to the gospel message, which brings me to the gospel message. If you're outside of the family of God, I want you to know that there's a Redeemer with more integrity than Boaz, more power, more authority, more kindness, mercy, grace, more resources, and everlasting life in Jesus. There was not a social program. There was not a catch net that could have rescued Naomi and Ruth. It was a Redeemer. It wouldn't have mattered how good they got. They still would have been hungry. They still would have been homeless, or unhoused, or unhealthy. It was a Redeemer. For you and I, it does not matter if we have our own resources, if we own our own home, if we have our own mate. We all need Jesus. There is no other name under heaven given among men whereby we must be saved. It is Jesus Christ. If you're without him today, I want you to know that he wants to be your Redeemer. He is not just willing, he is begging to be your Redeemer. Just give yourself to the Lord. Let's